responsible for
Okay.
you are.
Still have your email address.
Developing one.
So I think we're ready to start with everybody else. My name is Chris Hiller. I'm a developer advocate, lead developer advocate for Node.js at IBM. I'm on the platforms and languages team. And today I'm going to be talking about Node-RED. And so there's a couple other sessions. I'm doing another Node-RED session tomorrow. It's more of a deep dive. This is the intro. There's going to be another session Wednesday, I believe. Somebody's doing, this is how you use blocks with Node-RED. And so I'm just going to kind of gloss over a lot of that. And hopefully I won't, if you end up doing multiple sessions, hopefully I won't repeat, the information will be repeated. But, so many types of Node-RED. I'm going to explain what it is, what low-code development is, if you're not familiar with it. We're going to talk about its programming model. We're going to talk about who the intended users of Node-RED are. And then I'm going to do a couple of demonstrations of how Node-RED works and introduce you to the user interface. I'm just going to kind of go through it piece by piece and walk you through it. The first demonstration I'm going to do is I have a blog, and I'm going to grab an RSS feed, so a news feed from the blog, and then I'm going to have Node-RED tweak the titles to my blog post. Just kind of as an example. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the article, except I'm going to run it through Watson's natural language understanding service. They can gather some metadata. So to begin, I'm going to define a low-code development platform. So, what is a low-code development platform? Well, as the name implies, there's not a lot of code involved. Essentially, it's a development environment. It's just like any other development environment. It's a way to create programs or applications. The thing about low-code is it requires little or no knowledge of programming, concepts, of programming languages at all. And millions of people actually use low-code development platforms every day, so knowing they do. A popular one, which you may use yourself, and I do, is something called IFTTT. You may not even think of it as a low-code development platform, but it is. So IFTTT is an app, it's a service. There's a web page you can go to IFTTT.com. Stands for if this then that, and that's kind of the service in a nutshell. It's a consumer-grade, low-code development platform. In fact, they made it so low-code there's no code. But what IFTTT does is it glues together connected services. So that might be Gmail, that might be Spotify, that might be IBM Cloud, that might be Google Cloud, that might be Microsoft, yada yada yada. It might be a smart home device. They have maybe hundreds of connections. Users will go into the IFTTT app, and they'll use it to create these things called applets. So they're apps. They're very small apps. They do. And so they make their apps. They can share their apps with applets with other people. You can go on there and you can browse the applets that other people have created for the services you want to use. Maybe get some inspiration. Maybe you can just pick one out and just use it. But IFTTT has kind of distilled this to the essence of a low-code platform because there's no code, and I can't really envision a simpler app than an applet that you create with IFTTT. There's only two things that happen. Essentially, what you're doing when you use IFTTT is you are writing no code to make multiple API calls to disparate services. That's cool, right? So IFTTT proves that an intuitive user interface turns a complicated, short, and easy task. It's really easy. You can go, you can make all sorts of things with IFTTT. You don't need to be a developer. It's super simple. But I'm not here to extol the virtues of IFTTT. It's neat, but that's not. So with IFTTT's simplicity, there are drawbacks, limitations, of course. So you may use IFTTT, and you may wind up, trying to make this thing you wanted to make, and then realize that it won't let you. There's only a finite set of things IFTTT will do. There's a certain, maybe a few events that it can respond to from service A. There's maybe another handful of actions it can take in service B. And not all events are compatible with all actions. So you may have one event that is, I guess it would be a nonsensical integration, but you can't connect any event, any service to any other service. Some just don't make sense. So instead of using IFTTT, if you're a developer and you wanted to just sit down and write code, you could do just about anything. But that's not so with IFTTT and low-code platforms. Generally, the most common use cases are considered first. They're supported. After that, different services will allow for more or less flexibility. IFTTT is very flexible. You may have heard of another service called, I think it's called Zapier. And it offers a bit more flexibility. It's still the same kind of thing where you're connecting two services together. It's a little more flexible, not quite as simple. That's the trade-off. You move the slide. And so Node-RED, as a low-code development platform, it moves a slider even further. So where does it fall? It's somewhere between, if IFTTT is as simple as it gets, and hacking code is as complicated as it gets. Node-RED's somewhere in the middle. It tries to strike a balance, and the way it does that is with a flow-based programming model. So with a service like IFTTT, you could have something like, hey, it's dark outside. Maybe you have a sensor outside. Turn the lights on. Okay? But what you couldn't do is, hey, it's dark outside. Turn the lights on, and then send me a text message that I turn the lights on. You can't do that. If this, then that. Not if this, then that, then some other thing. Okay? You get A and you get B. However, IFTTT is also a flow-based model. It's just an extremely simple one, A to B. And we'll see that Node-RED is much more expressive. And I'll show you the difference next between a flow-based and a traditional sequential programming model. So you sit down to write program A, and program A, you decide, is going to go get a new article from some blog, and then it's going to get the link out of that article, and it's going to tweet it out on Twitter, and that's what the program does. It has a clear start and finish. There's a clear beginning and end. Likewise, program B is something you've coded up. Maybe you're using Twitter's API, such as it is, and you say, program B, we're going to start, we're going to get new tweets, and then we're going to, for some reason, you're going to text yourself. Maybe you're going to, you text your grandma or something, I don't know. And then it stops, and it's clear that this program A, program B. For each of these, you're going to write code and you run the program. If you want these programs to run on an interval, you're going to have to set up cron jobs. So in a flow-based model, there's less of a notion of a clear beginning and end. There's kind of a loop, if you will. Instead of start and end, there is wait. And what is wait? Wait means the flow-based model will wait for an event. And again, an event could be it's dark out. An event could be I got an email. An event could be I got an email from my insurance salesman. It could be somebody texted me, somebody messaged me on Slack, blah, blah, blah. These are all examples of events. A key difference here is that each of these little boxes is its own module, it's its own program. So instead of, go back here, program A is code, and it has this get new article, and it has this tweak link, and that's one program. Program B is its own encapsulated program, but it does two things as well. With this flow-based model, get new article is its own program. It's essentially a black box. It has some input, what article do I get, and it has some output, the article itself, the article content. Likewise, tweet link is another miniature application. What does that do? It basically it accepts, 140 or 280 characters, and it tweets it to Twitter's API, and that's a program, it's a module. And so, likewise, get new tweets and send them SMS. Those are both programs as well. And so, in a flow-based model, when we talk about flow, we're talking about essentially passing messages. When we want to get a new article, perhaps, the way RSS works is it will continually pull an endpoint, and that will give you an XML document in RSS or ATM format. It'll check the document IDs and see if there's been a new one. If there's been a new one, then great. I will take that article and create a message. And the message is kind of a key concept here. So it takes the article, puts it in a message, sends the message on to the next module or node as well. So you get the article, and then you go to the next node, which is tweet link. The tweet link node receives that message with the article in it. It knows what it's supposed to do with the information it receives, and it tweets the link out, and that's an action that it takes, and that's about the end of it. So this tweet link module might not send a message on it, it might. But what we end up next is we wait. And so maybe we wait 15 minutes and then we pull again for an hour. So an interesting thing here is that both of these two cycles can be running at the same time. It's concurrent. Flow-based programming is asynchronous. So back in the sequential model, it's a synchronous sequence of events. Sorry to use that, but you get the article, you tweet the link, that's it. If you want to run program A and program B at the same time, you have two terminals open and you run them at the same time. But with the flow-based programming model, everything runs at the same time. And so to program, there's going to be different abstractions and ways that these platforms can kind of represent these things. In IFTTT, basically they give you a wizard. And the wizard says, okay, what service do you want to start with? And so you pick one, maybe it's Slack. Then it'll give you a few different events to choose from. I got a direct message. Then you move on, okay, now what do you want to do with that direct message? And so you get to pick from another set of action, like services that will perform an action. You say, I want to text myself or something. And so you connect to Twilio or who knows. And then you say, I want to text this phone number. You type in your phone number, you hit return, and when you're done, you click enable, and that's it. So with Node-RED, it's very similar. It's not a wizard. But if this looks somewhat familiar, then the flowchart itself is relevant, but this is Visio that we all love. It's a flowchart. If you can make a flowchart, then you can use Node-RED. This is Node-RED. It's similar. So that's kind of a low-code development platform. It's flow-based programming in a nutshell. Node-RED in a nutshell. You'll get a much better idea of how it works. I'm going to sit down and show it to you. What I'm going to do is three things. I'm going to do an overview of the UI. I'm going to create this flow which grabs articles from homeschool.com, my blog, and it's going to tweet the article titles. And then another flow which uses Watson natural language understanding, and then I'm going to gather metadata about that article, and I'm not going to really do anything with it. I'm just going to show you how easy it is to do. So let me see if I can do this. So I think it's here. All right. So we're going to start. There's actually a there's actually a starter kit on IBM Cloud. I'm not going to walk through the whole, here's how you sign up for IBM Cloud. This is how you spin up a Cloud Foundry app. I'm not going to do that because it's not that fast, frankly. So you can go to the catalog here and you can search for Node-RED, and there's this starter kit, and what it does is you put in an app name and a host name, and you click this create button, and what it'll do is it'll spin up a Cloud Foundry app with Node-RED pre-installed, everything's ready. It's got a Cloud DB. So I've already done that, and where did it go? So that would be right here. And you can configure this. So actually, you can hit this if you manage to copy and paste that, or sorry, if you manage to type that out, you can check this out. Anybody can, I've set it up so anybody can look at it, but you have to log in to actually modify it. So what we'll do here is, so I'm already logged in. Is this, zoom. Can everybody read these okay, or do it need to be bigger in the back?
It's fine.
Okay. All right, so Node-RED, yeah. So there's integrations with IBM Cloud. If you go, Node-RED is an open source project. You can go to node-red.org. It'll point you to the download link. You can go and download it. You can run it on the computer. You can install it with NPM if you use Node.js. But there's some special integrations that Node-RED has with IBM Cloud, which are pretty handy. You'll see those. But so I'm going to go ahead and kind of explain this UI and laser pointer or something. But so over here to the left, we have, this is called the palette with all these colorful boxes. The palette is split up into categories. There's the input category here. It's triggered by external events only. So the things here, so for example, the HTTP, these are called nodes, but the HTTP end node actually creates an HTTP endpoint for you, and it'll run it on your Node-RED server, and you can hit it with a web browser if you want. You can hit it with some sort of request code if you like. Likewise, TCP is the same, except it's just a raw TCP socket. So the output category, this is going to be stuff like debugging information. You can send an HTTP response. So this HTTP in will actually set up the endpoint, but won't actually respond with anything. Now, so you can set up the endpoint, and you can connect a few nodes together, finally end up with a response, and that sends an output. These are all external outputs on there. The function category, this is where you're going to find things that mutate data. The function node itself allows you to write code. It's the only one that really allows you to write code. So there's you can just put JavaScript in here. It runs in Node.js, so if you know JavaScript, you can write code here. Split and join, you can split messages, join them back together. You can batch them together. You can convert from CSV and back again and things like that. The social category is email, Twitter. You'll note that there's two nodes. There's an email in, like with Twitter, there's an email out. So the email in gets a single email from IMAP server and forwards it on as a message. The email out sends. So that's why there's two of the same name. You'll note the positioning of these connector endpoints here. That shows how they can be connected. So storage, databases, analysis. The sentiment one is just kind of a built-in sentiment analysis tool. Predictive analytics is SPSS, if you're familiar with SPSS. Advanced seems like miscellaneous, I don't know. But there's feed parse in here, which is something we use. It parses some RSS rather than feed. Weather, smart process, and IBM Watson are all IBM specific nodes. And so it makes it really easy to work in conjunction with IBM Cloud and use services that you've deployed there. So the way you do this, and I believe Visio works similarly, where you have this palette and you drag stuff over onto this grid or this stage. And so here, the most basic, you can actually interact with this one. Some of them, most nodes don't allow you to interact with them, but you can do it with this one. So I've dragged this inject node over here onto the stage, and I can connect this to another node. I'm going to say debug node. So when I select one of these, I'm going over here to the right. This is the info pane or info panel. This is where all your documentation about a node is going to be. There's usually really important stuff to know here, so it's important that you understand it. What the inject node does, so it injects a message into a flow. We have a flow here. You'll note that there are tabs. You can have multiple flows. They can all run at the same time. The message payload can be a variety of types, including strings, JavaScript objects, or the current time. So right now, when I double-click on a node, I can open up the node property editor. This one is an inject node. Basically, it takes a value, a static value, or a timestamp, and it injects it as a message into your flow. Timestamp is fine. Topic, if you're familiar with MQTT, it has to do with MQTT. If you're not, don't worry about it. You can repeat this injection at an interval. You can not ever do it actually until you click on it. You can have it do it at a particular time of day. You can have it inject at startup time. So what happens maybe if I say I'm going to just type my name as a payload. I'm going to say done. Then this debug node so displays selected message properties in the debug sidebar tab. And optionally, the runtime log displays message payload by default. And so when you see MSG or you see message, these are the messages that nodes pass between each other. a message it's like a free form object. I mean, if you know JavaScript, it's just a plain JavaScript object with properties stuffed in it. There's no type other than object necessarily. You can pass other things. You can pass anything you want in the payload. The payload doesn't need to be any particular type. But so if I go ahead and deploy is the button that basically completes the wizard, as it were, and enables this code. So I click deploy, we deployed it, but nothing happened really because, so if I click this button, it'll inject it, great. But nothing happened. So what I need to do is just connect these with the connector. And then I can deploy that. When I click on this, it should, so message payload, let's take a look at the complete message object, deploy this. We can see here in our debug pane, this is the data that came in. So each message has a unique identifier. Each message has a topic, whether you use it or not. And each message is going to have a payload. That's about the minimum that any message can have. I can disable this debug node if I'm sick of it and it's too noisy. And I can tap on this all I want, but I'm not going to see more over here. So as I mentioned, each tab represents a flow. Actually, I'm going to back. So each node has its own properties. So in the case of this inject node, this is what the properties look like. In the case of debug, the properties look like this. Each one has its own properties. Each one has its own documentation. There's a set of nodes that ship as Node-RED, and then there's a rather large third-party ecosystem of nodes that you can go download and use. And I'll show you that in a minute. But a node, at a minimum, either receives a message or sends a message. So this inject node will send a message. The debug node receives a message. But the, for example, delay node will both receive and send a message. There may not be a one-to-one relationship between a message's input and output. That is, you're not guaranteed that if a message hits any particular node, one message will come out the other side. It might be two, it might be three, it might be none. Depending on the node's internal logic, it might not pass anything on. There might be an error. It might report that somewhere else. So each tab here represents a flow. These are mainly logical groupings, so it's organizational. It's for your own use, really. You can use a flow as something called a subflow. You can embed one in another. So the only functional thing that you can do with a flow is enable it or disable it. So you can enable it whatever you want in the world. I can choose to enable or disable this. If I disable it, only upon deploying will it actually stop working. So here we go. I deployed this, it's still enabled, but if I choose to disable it, nothing's going to happen until I click it. So up here in the menu, we have this deploy button. Anytime you make a change, it's going to become enabled, and you can click it to deploy all your changes. You can only deploy certain parts of it if you want. Most likely, you're just going to deploy the whole thing because it's pretty quick. Here you can have users and such, but in this menu, there's certain view options. You can import flows, you can export flows, you can share them. There's a way to actually browse and install them from the Node-RED site. So these are flows, the mobile programs that people have created and want to share. You can create subflows. That's this thing that said you can embed a flow number. You can manage palette. And so these are all the nodes that we have installed. But say I wanted to go and grab something, Alexa. So these are all third-party nodes that people have written and have published to NPM. And if I, this is a decent one, so I'm going to warn you, hey, you better read the documentation. I'm not going to do that. Oops. So I'm just going to click install. And what this does, behind the scenes, it runs NPM and installs this thing. NPM, puts it in the runtime, and look, there it is. And I can use it. And as soon as I hit deploy. And I can remove things that way and upgrade as well. So now, I'm going to get rid of this junk and make that Twitter RSS flow. So I have a blog at boneskull.com. boneskull.com. It looks like this. It's a blog. It's not that exciting, but it's what I got. And my blog has an RSS feed, as blogs tend to have. And so back here in Node-RED, the way you want to grab RSS feeds is with that feed parser node I mentioned. So I will drag the feed parser node over here. I'll take a look at the info. So monitors an RSS atom feed for new entries. It talks a bit, I note that there's no input to this. It creates a message and passes it forward. It talks about where it puts all this information it's getting out of the RSS feed. So what I'm going to need to do here, I'm going to have to give it a feed URL, and I'll need to tell it, call off and refresh. You can optionally give it a name. I think it will. So the feed URL of my site is actually, let's see, boneskull.com/RSS. And so if I hit that, if you're not familiar with what the RSS feed looks like, it's XML. So enjoy XML. Here we have the refresh. So it'll poll every 15 minutes. It'll ask Boneskull, hey, you got any new articles? And so it'll go ahead. If it doesn't find anything, nothing happens. So I'm going to say, let's see, get new articles. Wow. So this is my get new articles. Nothing I'm doing here is happening because I haven't hit the equal button yet. But so I'm going to tweet my article titles to a Twitter account. I set a Twitter account, and that Twitter account is, it's like Twitter CollabSphere 2018. Okay, this is the user I made for this. I went into apps.twitter.com, and this is how you create a third-party integration. So it's like, yeah, so this is the little app I created. There's some access tokens and keys in there. I need those to be able to use this back in Node-RED, but I've already set up those credentials. And so I can find, where's my Twitter tweety mode. So one of these is input, Twitter in. So we can search Twitter output node. This is the one that actually tweets. And so this will tweet the contents of message.payload. We see that from the info over here. And I'm going to configure it. So the Twitter ID, so you can have multiple sets of credentials in here. The credentials are encrypted and they're stored. I didn't write that part, but there's this CollabSphere 2018, and we can go ahead and say, I'm going to tweet the article title. That's what I'm going to do. So if I connect these two things, if I connected those two things, what's going to happen? So I would deploy it, and the message payload contains the description. Well, what's the description? I don't know off the top of my head. So I want to actually do kind of a dry run. And so I'm going to grab this debug node, and I'm going to look at the complete message object, because it, as this says, it sticks things in topic, payload, article, and I'm going to connect these two. And I'm going to look at my debug pane and deploy this. And so there it's grabbed all my articles at once and created each one of these as a message. But, so the payload is all this HTML. I don't want to tweet that, right? So what I actually want to tweet is something under here, article title. And also I want to provide a link back to the article itself, and that is a topic property. So I need to figure out how do I munge this data and turn it into what I need. And so I'm going to use one of these function nodes. All the function nodes, remember, have an input and an output. And the input, let's see, I can use a change node. So what's a change node? Set, change, or delete, or move properties of a message. It's kind of a general purpose Swiss Army knife of modifying a message. And I'm going to open this up. And what I want to do is, this is going to extract title and link. There's all these rules. I can have multiple ones, but I think I only need one. What I need is I need the result to be a message payload, because that's what the Twitter node expects. Everything it's going to tweet is in this payload property. And there's a expression language built into this called JSON ATA. JSON query and transformation language. It's actually kind of neat, but Node-RED supports this, and I can use this kind of DSL to grab what I need, which is the article title and the link. So that looks like article.title, and then I can use the ampersand for concatenation. I want a colon. And this is just a static string, and then finally I want a topic. And so if you can imagine, these are property paths within the message object. So if the message object has an article object, and the article object has a title string, this is how we get that. If the message object has a topic property, this is how we get that. So, okay. I'm going to extract the title and link because I need to have that to tweet. But again, I don't want to just tweet a million things all at once. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. So let's find out. So I made the change and deployed it, and we'll look over here at debug, and here's what the payload is. So it looks like so. How do you abuse TypeScript definitions for better code assistance in JavaScript projects? Link. Okay. Deal with object recognition with Raspberry Pi, Node.js, and Watson, link. That looks good. And so I think I want to tweak this stuff. But, I mean, you'll notice, I can force deploy again. When I do this, it all comes out like a fire hose, right? I don't want to hit the Twitter API 50 times a minute. Granted, I don't have that many blog posts up there, but maybe you do. I want to rate limit. That's how quickly it talks to Twitter. There's a lovely little node called the delay node to do that. The delay node, you can delay each message, which makes more sense if you only have a message once in a while, or basically if you don't have a whole bunch at once. If you do have a whole bunch at once, you want the rate limit action here. And so I'm going to limit this to one message per 1 second. That seems fair. So if I instead make this link, go ahead, let's clear that up. You can see that things come down a little more slowly. finally, I think I'm convinced. I'm going to go ahead and let's let Dangerous do all this stuff. So where's that? Where's that? Let's look at here. There they are. So it tweeted all of my articles and spam tweeted right. So next after this, I can reuse this part to get the new articles, because what I want to do is just analyze my article with Watson NLU. I want to jump back really quick to the this is the Cloud Foundry app, and this is, take a second. This is the Cloud Foundry app that Node.js is running on. But as you'll see when this comes up, I've went to the catalog. I've created an instance of the Watson Natural Language Understanding service, and I've connected it. I've created a connection between this Cloud Foundry app and that Watson Natural Language Understanding service. And so when this comes up, you'll see it. And when you create that connection, what it does for Node-RED, your Cloud Foundry app will know that, oh, there's this connection to this other thing in IBM Cloud. I can talk to that. I don't need you to put in or store all the credentials, right? So when you create a service in IBM Cloud, it could be anything, you're going to have a set of credentials, right? Maybe you have multiple sets of credentials. But if you connect an instance of a service to Node.js, it'll automatically find the credentials. You don't have to worry about copying and pasting them or storing them. They won't be stored in Node.js. They'll keep themselves in the environment there. And this is not coming up, thank you, but we can see here, and I'm going to go ahead and make another flow. We'll call this one the NLU flow. This editor here works kind of how you'd expect. It's pretty neat. So you can like copy and paste. So one node copy, just paste it right here in this other flow. And so my NLU, there it is. So if I double click on that, so I don't see anything about credentials up here. If it did not have those credentials from IBM Cloud, then it would prompt me to enter them. So with the NLU stuff, so NLU is, let's see, NLU analyzes text to determine concepts, entities, keywords, sentiments, and more. Metadata, semantic roles, relations. They'll take any block of text and extract all this metadata from it. You can customize that with your own classifiers. I'm not going to do that. I'm just using the set of classifiers that it comes with. But I'm going to take all my articles and I'm going to get the concepts in those articles. And so I'm going to click done. If I look at my info, this is the documentation. You can see that the content to be analyzed should be passed in on such payload. That means the text you want to utilize should be in the payload property. When I get my article from the blog, it puts the whole article in the payload property. So I don't need to mess with stuff. I can just connect these to each other. Back here in the documentation, I see that results from the API service will be made available in message.features. Okay, so I want to see what this says in the articles. So we connect these to this debugging. You'll find that you probably use debugging. I'm going to look at message.features here in the debug pane. I'm not going to rate them with this because it's my API. So, okay, so it didn't like some of this stuff. Oh, wait. Sorry. So that would be train. trying to tweet again. And it's telling me, don't tweet the same thing again and again. So what I probably should have done is just disable this. So the RSS feed, as long as Node-RED is running, it will wait for new ones. But if you restart or redeploy, it doesn't remember where you were, and so it'll get all the errors, which is handy for the demo, maybe not so much in the real world. But we can see that these that are not errors come out with a natural language service. And so here's a post I wrote about Mocha, which is a JavaScript testing framework, and Travis, which is a continuous integration server. And you can see that it's talking about staging, building, and software testing. And that came out of NLU. I didn't have to do anything except just drag it into the box. Now I can use this. Maybe I want to stuff that in the database. Maybe I want to go and turn around and talk to our blog software, automatically tag your post. So that's how you interact with the Watson service. Pretty much everything is supported. But back in PowerPoint. So we've learned about low code, what's low code development. We've learned about flow-based programming. I gave you an overview of the Node-RED user interface. I showed you how to use Node-RED to tweet about blog posts and get information from RSS feed and how to consume Watson services in Node-RED. So IBM is doing a call for code, which is natural disaster preparedness and relief. They're trying to get people to create open source software to solve some problems or work across and stuff. You can check that out if you want more information on it. And so that's all I got. So thank you. And these are my links. If you want to check out Node-RED on IBM Cloud, here's the link to do that. I'm Chris Hiller. I'm going to be talking again tomorrow. I'm doing a deep dive. What I'm going to be doing is, again, working with natural language understanding, but I'm going to connect Node-RED to Box, the document and kind of sharing platform. And I'm going to have it automatically tag metadata to documents based on the content right from within Node-RED using Watson.